Welcome back to Sportz Blitz Live. Really quickly, before we get to Logan Lowery of BulldogBlitz.com, want to let everybody know that supposedly Devonta Leonard has turned himself in. He's with his lawyer. I think the Auburn PD is going to have a press conference at 9:15. So that's great news that he has turned himself in, and now perhaps some of these people can deal with the finality of it all, and we can let the wheels of justice turn as quickly as they certainly can. And wow, that's good news. That just happened during this past commercial break. So really is very good news there that a killer is finally being brought into justice. Well, Logan, thank you for joining us tonight and talking to us a little bit about the Mississippi State Bulldogs. How are you tonight?
A little tired. Mississippi State's kind of been on a recruiting streak here over the last couple of days and kind of been busy with all that. They've picked up 8 commitments since Thursday. So
good night.
They're keeping me pretty busy. They've gotten 3 today. So
yeah, and I did see that. Now, one of them was from the state of Alabama, and DeAndre Woods. Talk a little bit about him and how excited are to have him.
Well, I mean, they picked up him and a 4-star running back in Caleb Moore, who's in the Rivals 250. I think he's ranked 133rd player in the country, and they picked those 2 guys up 10 minutes apart today. So they're really excited about DeAndre. He did really well at their camp. I think he came over on Saturday and performed really well, and he told me on Saturday that Mississippi State was kind of in his top 3 along with Vanderbilt and Purdue, and he came back up with his family today and just gave Dan Mullen the word, and he becomes out of their 10 commitments that they have so far, they've got 4 wide receivers, and of course they're losing 5 senior receivers after this year, so recruiting priority definitely this year is wide receiver, and you can kind of tell that early on in their recruitment.
I was taking a look at Mississippi State's schedule, and I got to tell you what, I can easily see this crowd heading to Tuscaloosa undefeated. I know that they've got a home game with Auburn, and that's going to be crucial. That's going to tell the tale, if you ask me. It's time for Dan Mullen to beat another SEC West opponent. And they got Auburn very early in the season. Auburn will be coming off a game against Clemson in Atlanta. Mississippi State will have them at home. I know I've been to that stadium many times, and I got to say that place will be at a fever pitch. But if they can get past that game, I really think they can make it to Tuscaloosa undefeated. What do you think?
Well, it's a good possibility. Looking at their schedule, I kind of feel the same way. You kind of have to circle that Auburn game in week 2. And, of course, Tennessee comes on October 13th. That's another kind of game that you circle. And those are kind of, got to put a question mark beside those games. But if Mississippi State wants to have another successful season and keep building this program and kind of make that little jump in the SEC, that they've got to win those games. They lost a close game at Auburn last year. They lost another close game here at home against South Carolina last year. And that's the difference between a Mississippi State team last year winning 9 games or winning 7 games like they did. So if they want to climb up and compete, for an SEC West, title, they've got to win some of those games. They've got to win those close games. And as of yet, the last 2 years, they just left those games on the field, and they haven't really won those closed SEC battles like they needed to. And they've got to find a way to close out those kind of games and hang on, and if they ever want to compete for a title.
I really like some of Mississippi State's skill position players, Tyler Russell, Ladarius Perkins at running back, and then, of course, Chad Bumpus. Talk about Mississippi State and what they've got, what they offer there.
Well, you look at their offense, and they're a team that's lost their quarterback, and they've lost a 1,000-yard rusher. And you go into this year, and you actually feel really good about their offense, even though they're losing those 2 players. But Tyler Russell is obviously the more accurate passer. He's known more for his passing than Chris Relf was with his running ability. And of course, they've got a whole slew of running backs, a lot of young guys, led by Ladarius Perkins, Nick Griffin. They're really excited about a guy that'll be a redshirt freshman in Josh Robinson. They've got a ton of young backs, and they're just going to kind of, be a stable back there. Kind of the experience of the team is actually their wide receivers. Like I mentioned before, they've got 5 senior wide receivers this year. But, the last few years, they just really haven't had a quarterback that could get them the football. And Dan Mullen's just kind of been itching to throw the football ever since he arrived in Starkville. And he's finally got a quarterback that can do it. Tyler Russell's made some spot starts last year, and a really highly touted guy coming out of high school in Mississippi, and was a parade All-American and all that stuff. But he's kind of come into his own. It took him a while to grow and adjust to the offense and all that stuff, but you can really just kind of see the change in him this spring. He's just really a totally different quarterback. There's no deer in the headlights look like we saw from him at times. I mean, once he gets the football in his hands, he knows where he's going to go with it. He's going to go through his progressions, and you can just see the confidence kind of just oozing out of him.
Well, really quickly, I'm going to take a quick detour off the football path just for a second here and ask you about Devonta Pollard. Of course, he commits to the University of Alabama after Mississippi State goes through a little turmoil in their basketball coaching ranks. Talk a little bit about that, and do you think it hurt Mississippi State at all that that they had a coaching turnover?
Oh, definitely. I actually think Devonta Pollard would have been a Bulldog had Mississippi State retained Rick Stansbury for another year. Just talking to his mom and stuff, his mom told me she wanted him at Mississippi State. But once I saw him drop Mississippi State from the ranks, I knew he was going to Alabama because his mom told me he didn't want him to go far from home. And, even though he kept all those other schools like Texas and all those other Missouri and some of those other schools in the mix, I knew he was headed to Tuscaloosa. But, yeah, definitely he would have probably been a Bulldog, had Mississippi State retained Rick Stansbury for another year.
And, Logan, if you don't mind, tell us right before we go to break, where do you think Mississippi State ends up in the SEC West this year in terms of football?
It's tough. I mean, like I said, if they can win in week 2 against Auburn, I really like their chances to be one of those, 3 or 4 seed in the SEC West. It's just such a tough division. But they've got to win. You got to just kind of circle that game against Auburn in week 2. And if they can get past Auburn that week, I really like their chances to have another successful season. I mean, looking at their schedule, I really don't see. I mean, you've got Alabama, LSU, and Arkansas, to kind of close out the year, and those are going to be some tough battles. But looking at every other game, I really think that they're winnable games.
Well, Logan, thanks for being with us, buddy. And we're going to have you on again, okay, during the season.
That sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
That was Logan Lowery with BulldogBlitz.com. We'll be back in just a minute with more Sportz Blitz Live.